I was thinking about this the other day. If you break your arm, an X-ray gives you this really clean, totally binary answer.
Right. It's just right there in black and white.
Exactly. The doctor just clips the film to the light board, points to that jagged white line, and says, well, there it is. There's the problem.
And that's actually incredibly comforting.
It is. We desperately want things to be visible. We want them to be easily categorized. But when your teenager suddenly stops speaking to you, that diagnostic X-ray just goes entirely black.
Oh, completely. It's terrifying.
Right. Like when they retreat into their room and that really heavy silence settles over your house, you think you speak the language fluently because, you've known this child since they took their first breath.
Yeah, you literally taught them how to speak.
Right. And then adolescence hits.
Mm.
And suddenly it feels like you've been dropped into a foreign country where you don't even recognize, hidden behind like slammed doors and deep sighs.
Exactly. Slam doors, the one-word answers. It is the absolute definition of diagnostic muddy waters. Parents are just left trying to decipher this super complex psychological puzzle with zero visibility.
And so today, we are really wading into those muddy waters. We are taking a thematic journey, a deep dive, really through the profound insights of T.A. Vale's complete first season of Parent Talk.
Which is such a fantastic resource.
It really is. We are pulling the absolute biggest, most transformative concepts from his teachings. We want to decode the modern teen heart, figure out how to actually create emotional safety, and look at, what it means to parent with grace when your own patience is just running on empty.
And I think what makes Vale's framework so compelling is his posture. He is not broadcasting from some mountain of parental perfection.
Oh, not at all. He's very open about that.
Right. His entire approach is born from hard-won wisdom, built entirely on the back of his own mistakes. He brings decades of experience from youth ministry, raising his own children, and eventually becoming a grandfather.
Yeah. And he frequently talks about the gentle and sometimes, not so gentle corrections God has given him over the years.
He is literally the first person in the room to admit he wishes he had a time machine. Like, just to rewind, a disastrous 30-second interaction with his own kid.
Which is just such a massive relief to hear. Because if you are listening to this right now, we know the mental state you might be in.
Oh, absolutely.
You might be driving to work, feeling completely exhausted by the constant friction in your home. Or, you might be lying awake at night worried sick about your child's sudden withdrawal.
Just wondering if you've already ruined the relationship beyond repair.
Yes. So we want to establish this right out of the gate for you. You are not alone, and you have absolutely not run out of chances to turn this around.
So let's unpack this, because before we can even begin to strategize about how to connect with our teenagers, we have to grasp the unprecedented, frankly, crushing weight they are currently carrying.
Which is heavy. It is so heavy.
It is. And doing that requires a massive paradigm shift for us as adults. We have to completely dismantle that generational myth of, well, we had it just as hard when we were kids, and we turned out fine.
Oh, man, that myth is so deeply ingrained in us. We look at them lying on the couch, staring at a screen, and we just think, you have air conditioning and a refrigerator full of food. What could possibly be so hard?
Right. It's the classic, I walked uphill both ways in the snare mentality.
Exactly. But comparing our adolescence to theirs, it just completely shuts down empathy. It's like we're trying to hand them a map of the city we grew up in, but the city has been completely rebuilt from the ground up.
The streets are different. The hidden dangers are entirely new.
Yeah, and the old map is worse than useless. It actually leads them right into traffic.
That's a great way to put it. And Vale highlights a structural difference between adolescence 30 years ago and adolescence today that perfectly illustrates this rebuilt city.
The off switch, right?
Yes, the off switch. For previous generations, the physical home functioned as an automatic off switch. If you had a humiliating experience in the school cafeteria or you got into a bitter fight with your friend group, the acute pain of that social rupture ended the moment you crossed the threshold of your front door.
Because the school bully wasn't sitting in your living room.
Exactly. You were safe.
You could just retreat, watch television, eat a bowl of cereal, and just breathe for a few hours. The social hierarchy of the hallway literally couldn't get past your front porch.
But today, the pressure follows them home in their pockets. It vibrates on their nightstand at 2 in the morning. There is just zero reprieve.
None. And the environmental shift is staggering when you look at the numbers.
It really is. The U.S. Surgeon General's advisory on youth mental health, which Vale references, notes that teenagers are spending an average of 4.8 hours a day on social media platforms.
Okay, wait, just think about the math on that for a second. 4.8 hours. Before they even sit down at your kitchen table for dinner, they have spent almost 5 hours submerged in an environment that is literally engineered to make them feel inadequate.
Engineered by billions of dollars of algorithmic research, no less.
Right. They are constantly comparing their own messy, behind-the-scenes reality to everyone else's aggressively curated highlight reel.
And we have to look at the neurobiology of why those algorithms are so devastating, because the adolescent brain is hypersensitive to peer validation.
It's a survival thing, isn't it?
It is entirely a survival thing. In evolutionary terms, for a teenager, social isolation equated to death. If you were kicked out of the tribe, you just didn't survive the winter.
Wow. Okay, so that changes the context entirely.
Right. So when a teenager is on social media, they aren't just casually looking at pictures. Their brain's threat detection center is constantly assessing their social standing.
So a lack of likes or being left off a group text is not just a bummer.
No, not at all. Seeing a party they weren't invited to doesn't just feel sad. Their biology processes it as a literal survival threat.
That explains the intense visceral reactions so much. I mean, when we look at the CDC Youth Risk Behavior Survey data from the sources, it paints a harrowing picture of what living under that constant threat level does to a population.
The statistics are really sobering.
They are. 40% of high school students report persistent feelings of sadness or hopelessness. And an absolutely chilling 20% that's 1 in 5 teenagers have seriously considered attempting suicide.
1 in 5. I mean, when confronted with those statistics, the default parental defense mechanism often kicks in.
Because we get scared.
We do.
Yeah,
And so we immediately want to point to the historical struggles we faced. You know, the Cold War, economic recessions, latchkey childhoods. We survived our trauma, so why can't they survive theirs?
But the mechanics of the trauma are fundamentally different now. Our threats were largely external or, macroeconomic. Their threats are intimate, relentless, and directly tied to their core sense of identity and belonging.
And furthermore, we are expecting adult-level emotional regulation from people whose neurological hardware is literally still under construction.
Yes, the brain science on this is fascinating.
It really is. The data from the National Institute of Mental Health is critical here. The prefrontal cortex, which is the region of the brain responsible for impulse control, complex decision-making, considering future consequences, and regulating intense emotions, it is the very last part of the brain to mature.
Right. It's not fully developed until around age 25.
Exactly, age 25.
Which is wild. But here's where it gets really interesting to me. The amygdala, which is the emotional, instinctual fight-or-flight center of the brain, that part is fully operational during adolescence.
Right, so they have adult-sized emotions, but the part of the brain required to manage those emotions is essentially a construction zone.
And Vale uses this brilliant metaphor for this biological reality.
Where?
He says teenagers are operating a vehicle with a massive high-performance engine capable of going 100 miles per hour, but the brakes are still being installed.
The brakes just aren't there yet.
And if you know the brakes are faulty, it changes everything about how you view the crash. Correct.
It completely removes the assumption of malice. I mean, when your teenager has a catastrophic meltdown over something that seems entirely trivial to you, like the Wi-Fi dropping out or a slightly critical comment about their outfit, they aren't necessarily being manipulative.
Right. They're not just trying to ruin your evening.
No. They are experiencing 100-mile-per-hour emotion. They reach for the neurological brakes to slow themselves down, and the wiring just isn't there yet. Dysregulation, to a significant extent, is a feature of adolescent development, not a bug.
So what does this all actually mean for the parent standing in the kitchen watching this meltdown happen?
Well, it means we have to stop comparing our hard to their hard.
Yeah. Your struggles growing up were entirely valid, and their current struggles are entirely valid.
But when a stressed teenager hears, well, I had it way worse than you, it doesn't motivate them to build resilience. It merely communicates that you are an unsafe person to share pain with.
Wow, yeah. We have to give them the grace to be utterly depleted when they walk through the door.
And that state of depletion leads us directly into probably the most pervasive and frustrating dynamic of modern parenting.
The silence.
The silence. Because they're carrying this immense 24/7 psychological weight with an unfinished prefrontal cortex, they almost universally lack the vocabulary to articulate what is happening inside their own heads.
Which brings us to the dreaded wall of silence. You ask, how was school? You get fine.
Yep, every time.
You ask, what's wrong? And they snap, nothing, I'm fine.
Yeah.
It is maddening. You know they aren't fine, they know they aren't fine, but you are completely locked out.
And Vale's analysis of this specific praise is revolutionary for parents.
Yeah.
He teaches that "I'm fine" is actually the most complex, multi-layered sentence a teenager ever speaks.
It's not just blowing you off.
Right. It is rarely a statement of fact. It is a protective shield.
When they say I'm fine, the translation matrix is vast. Like sometimes it translates to, I am so overwhelmed by my own feelings that I couldn't explain them to you even if I wanted to.
Or sometimes it means I am completely exhausted from managing my social survival all day, and I just do not have the cognitive energy to unpack my psyche for you right now.
And very frequently it translates to, I am terrified of how you are going to react if I actually tell you what happened today, so I'm going to shut this conversation down before it even starts.
Exactly. But as a parent, the instinctual reaction to that one-word answer is deep resentment.
Oh, absolutely. You feel personally rejected. You think, I drove you to travel soccer all weekend, I bought your expensive shoes, I made your favorite dinner, and you can't even give me a full sentence.
Right. It feels like total disrespect. But recognizing that I'm fine is a shield of exhaustion rather than a weapon of disrespect. It just changes the entire dynamic.
If we look beneath the surface of that shield, Vale introduces the classic iceberg analogy to explain adolescent behavioral presentation.
The iceberg is such a good visual.
It is what you observe above the water. You know, the heavy sighs, the eye rolling, the sarcasm, the sudden retreat to their bedroom that is just the tiny visible tip. The massive healing structure underneath the waterline is composed of fear, peer rejection, profound loneliness, or just escalating anxiety.
And the clinical findings from the American Psychiatric Association add a really terrifying layer to this iceberg, because we are conditioned to think that depression looks like crying, lethargy, or visible sadness.
Right, like they're just lying in bed all day.
Right. But the APA notes that in adolescence, depression frequently presents as intense irritability, anger, and hostility.
That is such a critical distinction. Sadness is an inherently vulnerable emotion. It exposes the soft underbelly. Anger, on the other hand, is a mobilizing emotion.
It puts up defensive spikes.
Exactly. A teenager who feels hopelessly depressed might subconsciously choose anger because anger feels powerful, whereas sadness just feels weak.
So a teenager who seems constantly furious, who picks fights over nothing, or who marinates in heavy sarcasm, they might actually be in the middle of a major depressive episode.
And if you only react to the spikes, if you only discipline the attitude, you are entirely missing the critical psychological crisis happening beneath the surface.
Right, you're treating the symptom, not the disease.
Okay, wait, but I struggle with this concept in practice. Let's talk about the reality of this. If my kid walks through the door, throws their backpack on the counter, gives me a massive eye roll when I ask a simple question, and then slams their door so hard the pictures rattle on the wall.
Yeah, the classic entrance.
Right. My instinct is not to think, oh, my poor depressed child. My instinct is to march in there and ground them for flagrant disrespect. So how do parents navigate this without simply letting a teenager hold the entire household hostage to their moods?
And that is the tightrope every single parent is walking. Vale provides a highly practical metric for navigating this tension, which aligns beautifully with clinical best practices. He says you have to train yourself to look for patterns, not just moments.
Okay, unpack the distinction between a pattern and a moment for us.
So, a moment is an isolated event. Everyone, regardless of age, has a terrible Tuesday. If they slam a door once after a really bad math test, you handle that moment with your standard household boundaries.
You can still address the disrespect calmly.
Exactly, you don't ignore it. But a pattern is a sustained behavioral shift. If the withdrawal from family life stretches on for weeks, if their sleep architecture radically changes, like they can't fall asleep until 3 in the morning, or they're suddenly sleeping 14 hours a day.
Right, or if they abruptly quit the basketball team they used to love.
Yes. Or if their baseline tone shifts from generally cooperative to persistently hostile over a long period. Those are patterns.
And when you identify a pattern, the absolute worst thing you can do is argue with the shield. If they look miserable and say, I'm fine, responding with, no, you aren't. I can tell something is wrong, just tell me. That only forces them to grip the shield tighter.
You are just backing them into a defensive corner.
So the strategy has to shift from interrogation to observation. You respond to the behavioral data, not the verbal deflection.
Right. You might say something like, I've noticed you haven't seemed like yourself the last few weeks. You seem really heavy. You don't have to explain anything to me right now, but I want you to know I see it and I am right here whenever you are ready.
You validate their experience while simultaneously lowering the stakes of the interaction.
Lowering the stakes is key, and that is the perfect entry point into the next major concept Vale covers.
Right. Emotional safety.
Yes. Once we recognize that the anger and the silence are protective shields, the burning question becomes how do we create an environment where they actually feel comfortable lowering those shields?
Vale's answer is that we have to fundamentally understand the architecture of emotional safety. And we need to draw a hard line between physical safety and emotional safety.
Because parents are biologically programmed to provide physical safety. We install security systems, we mandate seatbelts, we track their phones to make sure they arrived at the party.
We excel at keeping their bodies safe.
We really do. But emotional safety operates on a completely different set of metrics. You can have a teenager living in a pristine house in a gated community, protected by a state-of-the-art alarm system, who feels a suffocating lack of safety the moment they walk into their own kitchen.
Wow, that's a heavy thought. Emotional safety is determined by predictability and reception. Vale emphasizes a reality that should stop every parent in their tracks. Teenagers decide whether or not they are going to tell you the truth long before the conversation actually begins.
They do not weigh the pros and cons in real time while you are asking them a question. The verdict has already been reached based on historical data.
They are essentially running an internal algorithm. They are scanning their memory banks for the last time they brought you a problem or admitted a failure. And they're asking, what was the exact sequence of events?
Did your jaw clench? Did your tone shift from conversational to authoritative?
Did a moment of vulnerability instantly mutate into a 45-minute lecture about their future?
And if the historical data shows that honesty results in a severe emotional penalty, they log that information. The subconscious calculation is really simple. The cost of truth in this house is too high.
Therefore, I will provide the minimum amount of information required to just end this interaction.
And the terrifying part is that their inherent human need to be known, to share their burdens, that doesn't just evaporate because you aren't a safe space.
No. If they cannot find emotional safety in their own living room, they will outsource that need. They will find safety in unmonitored Discord servers, or with a peer group that encourages destructive behavior, or in numbing mechanisms that demand no accountability.
The primary reason parents unintentionally destroy emotional safety is due to a dynamic Vale calls the fixer trap. And this is crucial because it isn't born out of malice.
No, it is born entirely out of profound parental love.
Exactly. We love them so intensely that seeing them in emotional pain triggers our own internal distress. We want to neutralize the threat to our child, which simultaneously reduces our own anxiety.
So when they come to us hurting, we rush straight past their feelings and immediately start aggressively managing the logistics of the problem.
We shift right into project management mode.
I am so guilty of this. Like if a teenager says, I am so overwhelmed by my AP history class, I feel like I'm drowning. The fixer parent immediately responds with, well, let's look at your schedule. If you put your phone away at 7 and utilized a color-coded planner, you wouldn't be in this situation. Let's make a spreadsheet.
We think we are being incredibly helpful. We are equipping them with the tools for success.
But what the teenager actually processes is, my feelings of overwhelm are invalid, my distress is entirely my own fault because I am disorganized, and my parent is disappointed in me.
We may have offered a solution to the history class, but we have completely severed the emotional connection.
And Vale introduces a vital distinction here between communication and connection. Parents often confuse the two.
Asking, did you finish your history essay? What time is marching band practice? Did you feed the dog? That is communication. It is the necessary transfer of logistical data to keep the household running.
But asking what felt heavy in your world today,
Yeah.
or what was the best part of your Tuesday,
Hmm.
that is connection. Connection targets the internal reality, not the external schedule.
And to cultivate that internal connection, Vale advocates for a highly specific physical approach to conversation, which he calls the side-by-side method.
This is brilliant because it relies on human physiology. When parents want to have a quote-unquote deep conversation, our instinct is to sit the teenager down at the kitchen table, square our shoulders, look them dead in the eye, and say, tell me what is going on with you.
And to a teenager, that intense, sustained eye contact doesn't feel like love. It feels like a spotlight in an interrogation room.
It spikes their cortisol levels and immediately triggers their defensive shields. The emotional temperature of the room just skyrockets.
Because the most profound, revealing conversations rarely happen face to face, they happen in the margins.
They happen when you are both staring out the windshield of the car on a dark highway.
Yes, or standing side by side at the sink washing dishes, or folding laundry, or staring at a television screen watching a game.
The absence of direct eye contact acts as an emotional pressure release valve. It allows the teenager to speak into the open space rather than directly into your intense gaze.
And when they do finally take a risk and open up in one of those side-by-side moments, Vale offers a golden rule of response that every single parent should write on their bathroom mirror.
When your teenager admits a mistake, confesses a failure, or tells you something incredibly hard to hear, the absolute first words out of your mouth must be, "Thank you for telling me."
Not, "What on earth were you thinking?" Not, "Do you realize how dangerous that was?"
Just profound gratitude for the truth.
Now, that doesn't mean you abdicate your role as a parent and pretend actions don't have consequences. Vale is very clear that appropriate discipline is necessary for growth.
But you do not have to issue the discipline in the first 30 seconds. You have the rest of the week to handle the consequences. In that initial moment of confession, your sole responsibility is to protect the relationship.
You validate the immense courage it took for them to bypass their fear and tell you the truth.
Doing that, saying thank you instead of exploding, requires a monumental amount of self-control. Which brings us to the most challenging pillar of Vale's teachings, the concept of emotional discipline.
Because creating emotional safety for our teenagers demands that we possess emotional discipline ourselves. We cannot possibly teach them a regulation skill that we actively refuse to model.
This is where the curriculum pivots from analyzing the teenager's brain to holding up a very unforgiving mirror to the parent's behavior.
It is uncomfortable, but it is necessary.
It really is. If we expect our kids to manage their 100-mile-per-hour emotions with faulty brakes, how are we managing our emotions with a fully developed brain?
And Vale makes a fascinating theological and psychological distinction here. He argues that emotional discipline is not synonymous with emotional suppression.
He frequently points to the life of David in the Psalms to illustrate this, right?
Yes, David did not suppress his humanity. The Psalms are filled with poetry detailing sheer terror, furious anger, profound grief, and desperate confusion. He experienced the full spectrum of human emotion.
So the goal of emotional discipline isn't to become a robotic, stoic parent who never feels frustration or anxiety.
Exactly the opposite. Emotional discipline is the practice of feeling the intense heat of the emotion, acknowledging its presence, but intentionally refusing to let it grab the steering wheel.
Emotions provide vital information, but they are catastrophically bad decision makers.
It's the ultimate proof of the old adage, more is caught than taught.
Oh, absolutely. You can sit your teenager down and deliver a beautifully articulated, philosophically sound lecture on the importance of conflict resolution and maintaining one's temper.
Yeah.
But if, an hour later, they watch you absolutely lose your mind screaming at a customer service representative on the phone.
Or snapping aggressively at your spouse because the internet is slow.
Right. Your beautiful lecture is dead on arrival. They learn how to navigate stress entirely by watching how you navigate stress.
They are the most astute behavioral scientists in the world, and you are their primary subject. They are constantly logging data on your reactions.
It's like we, the parents, are the central emotional thermostat for the entire house. If a teenager brings us a problem that registers as a level 4 on the stress scale, and we immediately crank the thermostat up to a level 10, pacing the floor, raising our voice, catastrophizing the future, they quickly realize that sharing information makes the house unlivable.
So, to keep the ambient temperature of the house cool, they will simply stop bringing us problems.
That thermostat analogy perfectly captures the dynamic. But this raises the inevitable question. What happens when our internal wiring fails? What happens when we lose our temper, when we react out of our own exhaustion, when we yell at them for something minor?
Because failure is guaranteed. We are human beings raising human beings. We are going to blow it.
We will absolutely blow it.
Yeah.
And this is the moment where Vale introduces what might be his most transformative concept, the profound power of the parental apology.
In many traditional parenting paradigms, apologizing to a child is viewed as a dangerous concession of power. There is a fear that if you admit fault, you lose your authority and the teenager will exploit your weakness.
But Vale completely flips that script. He argues that a sincere apology is the ultimate demonstration of mature leadership. Imagine the impact of looking your teenager in the eye without any caveats or excuses and saying, I did not handle that conversation well earlier. I let my own anxiety get the better of me. I raised my voice, and I shouldn't have spoken to you that way. I was wrong, and I am sorry. Will you forgive me?
Think about the neurological and psychological rewiring that occurs in the teenager when they hear that. It teaches them three vital lessons that will dictate how they handle relationships for the rest of their lives.
First, it teaches them the concept of rupture and repair, that making a mistake does not mean the relationship is permanently broken.
Second, it redefines maturity. It shows them that being an adult doesn't mean being perfect. It means taking absolute ownership of your failures rather than blaming them on your circumstances.
And third, it communicates intrinsic value. When a powerful figure, the parent, humbles themselves to apologize, it tells the teenager, you're a person worthy of respect.
Your teenager does not need you to be a perfect parent. In fact, a parent who presents an illusion of perfection is deeply intimidating and creates an environment of hidden shame.
They need a growing parent. When they see you actively wrestling with your own emotional discipline and acknowledging your shortcomings, it gives them the psychological permission to be a work in progress as well.
As we confront our own immense imperfections and we measure them against the unprecedented cultural and digital pressures our teenagers are navigating, a stark reality begins to set in.
We do not possess the human capacity to do this perfectly. The variables are just too complex, and our energy is too limited.
Which leads us into Vale's powerful synthesis of faith and practical clinical intervention.
This is a highly nuanced balance, and Vale navigates it with incredible care. Let's examine the faith component first, specifically regarding how parents utilize prayer, because it is incredibly common for well-meaning parents to accidentally weaponize their faith against their children.
It is a really subtle trap, usually driven by parental desperation.
It usually plays out like this. A parent is intensely frustrated by a teenager's behavior, so they suggest, hey, let's pray about this together. And then the parent proceeds to deliver a 5-minute prayer that functions as a passive-aggressive laundry list of every flaw the teenager possesses.
Lord, I pray that you would soften Michael's hardened heart, and please help him to stop being so disrespectful to his mother.
And Lord, open his eyes to the bad choices he is making with his friends.
To the teenager kneeling next to them, that is not a divine encounter. It is a highly manipulative lecture amplified by a spiritual microphone. It is an attempt to use God as the ultimate enforcer of house rules.
The tragedy of weaponized prayer is twofold. It immediately pushes the teenager away from the parent, but more devastatingly, it pushes them away from God, because God has been positioned as merely an extension of the parent's disapproval.
Vale's corrective advice here is highly practical. If you want to pray with your teenager, first, respect their autonomy by asking for permission. Can I pray a quick blessing over you before you head to school?
Second, keep it exceedingly short and exclusively positive. Do not preach a sermon with your eyes closed. But the most crucial paradigm shift Vale offers is this. The most powerful, transformative prayers a parent will ever pray are the ones prayed entirely in secret.
That concept offers a massive release valve for parents who feel anxious because their teenager is aggressively shutting down all spiritual conversations. You cannot force a teenager to believe, you cannot force them to develop character, but you can retreat to the quiet of your own room and surrender them.
Private prayer is the ultimate antidote to parental anxiety because it is an act of relinquishing control. You are acknowledging the limits of your own influence and trusting that there is a process happening underground in the deep root system of your child's life long before any visible behavioral fruit appears above the surface.
However, Vale is equally emphatic, and this is a major focal point of his curriculum, that deep faith and aggressive professional clinical help are not mutually exclusive. They are not enemies.
This is a vital correction because there is a painful history in certain faith communities of spiritualizing complex mental health crises. There has been a toxic tendency to look at a teenager suffering from clinical depression and tell them they just need to pray more, or choose joy, or read their Bible with more dedication.
That approach is profoundly destructive. It takes a teenager who is already suffering from a biological or psychological deficit and heaps a massive burden of spiritual shame on top of it.
Now, they don't just feel hopelessly depressed. They feel like their depression is proof that God has abandoned them, or that their faith is defective.
Vale dismantles the stigma aggressively. If your car's transmission completely fails on the highway, you might pray for safety, but you also call a tow truck and hire a mechanic. God operates through common grace, providing brilliant doctors, licensed counselors, and evidence-based therapies.
The curriculum includes very explicit safety protocols that we need to highlight right now. If you are tracking the behavioral patterns we discussed earlier, if your teenager begins making casual, hopeless comments about the future, if you discover evidence of self-harm, if they mention feeling like a burden to the family, or if there is any hint of suicidal ideation, you do not wait.
You do not hope it is just a phase. You do not try to handle it exclusively with prayer.
You escalate immediately. Engaging a licensed clinical therapist, calling the Suicide and Crisis Lifeline at 988, or taking your child to the emergency room if they are in imminent danger. These actions are not failures of faith.
They do not mean you didn't pray hard enough. They are acts of profound stewardship, wisdom, and fierce parental love.
To everyone listening,
Yeah.
you have full permission to lean heavily on the medical community. You are allowed to utilize school psychologists. You do not have to carry the crushing weight of a severe adolescent mental health crisis in isolation. Seeking professional help is the defining characteristic of a strong, healthy parent.
It is the ultimate expression of establishing that emotional and physical safety net we talked about.
So as we pull back and look at the grand tapestry of everything we've covered today, what is the ultimate takeaway? When you reflect on the complete journey of Parent Talk Season 1, it becomes incredibly clear that T.A. Vale is not trying to hand parents a checklist for engineering the perfect child.
He isn't selling a psychological cheat code to bypass the pain of adolescence.
The entire curriculum is fundamentally about a shift in posture, is a masterclass in presence. It is grounded in the reality that deep, resilient relationships are not built in a single dramatic weekend retreat.
They are built or painstakingly rebuilt by laying one single brick at a time, day after day.
Every single time you bite your tongue and listen to a ridiculous story without interrupting, you lay a brick. Every time you swallow your pride and apologize for losing your temper over the messy room, you lay a brick.
Every time you refuse to argue with the I'm fine shield and instead just sit side by side with them on the couch watching a movie in silence, you lay a brick.
We have to remember that aggressive correction might force a change in their behavior for a fleeting moment. But sustained connection is the only thing that possesses the power to change their heart over time.
And I want to speak directly to the parent listening right now who is feeling overwhelmed by regret. If you have been listening to this deep dive and mentally tallying up all your past failures,
If you are thinking about the times you screamed until your throat hurt, the times you rushed to fix a problem and completely invalidated your child's anxiety, or the times you unknowingly used weaponized prayer,
hear this clearly. You have not run out of chances. The story of your relationship with your teenager is not over. As long as you have breath in your lungs, today represents a completely new opportunity to pivot.
you can walk into their room tonight, sit on the edge of the bed, and simply say, "I'm sorry, I haven't been doing this well, and I want to do better."
Keep showing up. The parent who refuses to quit, the parent who keeps laying one brick at a time despite the pushback, is the parent who eventually breaks through the wall.
It is never, ever too late to become a safe place for your child.
To close our deep dive today, we want to leave you with a final provocative thought that synthesizes the absolute core of Vale's material. It is a concept that hums quietly underneath every single strategy and statistic we've discussed.
Consider this possibility. In the agonizing, beautiful, terrifying, and exhausting struggle to raise your teenager, God might actually be using this exact season to raise you.
It is a profound, paradigm-altering shift in perspective. We spend vast amounts of emotional energy obsessing over how we are shaping these kids. Are we giving them the right tools? Are we correcting them enough? Are our mistakes ruining their future?
But Vale subtly hints throughout his teachings that absolutely nothing on earth exposes our own hidden fears, our desperate, clawing need for control, our deep-seated pride, and our own unhealed childhood wounds, quite like the experience of parenting a teenager.
Perhaps the agonizing silence that frustrates you, the sudden pushback that triggers your anger, and the chaotic emotional storms that leave you feeling utterly depleted, perhaps those are not just obstacles to be managed.
Perhaps they are the exact, precise tools being used to refine your own patience, your own humility, your own capacity for grace.
You aren't just raising them. The intense refining fire of this journey is actively raising you.
It ruthlessly strips away your illusion of control and forces you to rely on a strength and a grace far outside of yourself.
So the next time you feel like you are staring helplessly at a broken X-ray machine,
The next time you feel like you've completely forgotten how to speak their language, and you are wandering lost in a foreign landscape of slammed doors and defensive shields, remember that you don't need a perfect translation.
You don't need to fix the problem instantly. You just need to sit beside them, lower the temperature, and let them know with absolute certainty that you aren't going anywhere.
Thank you for joining us for this deep dive. Keep laying those bricks. Keep showing up.